Part 1. The Request. Dr. Nathan Cole was finishing the last of his patient notes when the call came. His phone buzzed on the desk. Carol was calling. He already felt the tension before he even picked up. Carol Herman, his mother in law, never called him directly. That alone was a warning sign. Nathan? Her voice was honeyed, the kind of sweetness that hides a sting. I need to talk to you about Ryan. Ryan, her son, Nathan's brother in law. The name alone was enough to sour the evening. She explained that Ryan needed surgery, a procedure Nathan was more than qualified to perform. She made it sound simple. A favor, really. Something a family member does without blinking. And then she dropped the part she had been building up to. She didn't want him to charge anything. This would be a gift, she said. A gift from Nathan to his family. Nathan set down his pen slowly. He chose his words with the precision of a man who had learned, the hard way, that careless ones could detonate. No, he said, I won't be doing that. The silence that followed was long enough to be its own sentence. Why not? Carol asked, but her sweetness was gone. Because, Carol, quite frankly, I don't like your son. Part 2. Why Nathan hated Ryan. It hadn't always been discussed. At first, Nathan had simply found Ryan exhausting. He was the kind of man who wielded humor like a blade, always aimed at someone else's throat. But over time, the jokes accumulated into something that could no longer be laughed off. When a respiratory virus had gripped the country 2 years in a row, Nathan had been on the front lines. 14-hour shifts, reused gloves, colleagues collapsing from exhaustion. During a family dinner, Ryan had swirled his whiskey and called the doctors on the TV overpaid actors. Nathan had set his fork down and stared to him. When Nathan had gently urged their young cousin's parents to vaccinate their newborn, Ryan had loudly told the family Nathan was pushing pharmaceutical propaganda. The baby mother had looked uncertain for weeks after that. And then there was the worst one. The rumor Ryan had seeded at the gathering that Nathan had cheated his way through medical school. Just a joke, Carol had said. He was just being Ryan. But Nathan had heard it repeated back by a colleague, slightly distorted, slightly more credible. Jokes he had learned don't stay in the room where they were told. These weren't isolated incidents, they were a pattern. Ryan Harmon had made it his quiet mission to undermine Nathan at every turn, and until recently, Nathan had borne it with the silent dignity of men who believed the best strategy was patience. He no longer believed that. Part 3. The Wedding. Nathan's wife, Danielle, had always had a complicated relationship with her younger brother. She loved him the way people love things that love hurt them, deeply, with a kind of helpless loyalty. And Ryan knew exactly how to use it. Their wedding had been meticulously planned. 2 years of evenings spent comparing venues, budgeting caterers, and agonizing over the playlist. They had booked a DJ they both loved, a close friend of Daniela's from college, who played everything from jazz standards to old school R&B. It was perfect. But Ryan had a different vision. He had found some local band through his network, wanted them to be booked for the reception. When Daniela gently declined, explaining they were already our budget, Ryan did what Ryan always did. He reframed the issue as one of emotion, not finances. He reminded Daniela of the down payment he had helped her make on her first car, the time he had covered 2 months of rent while she finished her graduate program. He said their mother would love seeing him involved. He made one final point, almost as a passing thought. Nathan was a doctor. What was a little extra cost to him? That night, Daniela told Nathan she wanted to add the band. Nathan watched her face carefully as she explained it. There was something strained in her eyes, the look of someone trying to convince themselves of something. He wanted to say no. He wanted to explain methodically, but the budget existed for a reason. That DJ was already booked. But he looked at his future wife and he let it go. Part 4. The partnership that was stolen. 2 years before the phone call with Carol, Nathan had been on the verge of the biggest professional opportunity of his career. A prestigious private clinic in the city was selecting a new partner, someone who would co own the practice, shape its direction, bring their specialization in. The clinic's founder had taken Nathan to diner twice. The conversation had been warm, detailed, full of future tense language. Nathan had allowed himself to feel hope. At a family dinner shortly before the final board review, Nathan had mentioned the opportunity, not boastfully, simply with the careful optimism of someone who has worked for something a long time. Ryan had smirked across the table and said it sounded exciting. Just make sure you don't have any skeletons rattling around, he had added, with a small laugh. You know how boards are. Nathan hadn't understood what that meant. He had filed it away under Ryan being Ryan and moved on. 3 weeks later, an anonymous email arrived in his inbox. Attached were screenshots, forum posts, forwarded messages, all suggesting Nathan had been involved in a malpractice incident a years prior. The details were vague, the sourcing was murky, but they were specific enough to sound credible. His name was attached to the language like neglines and covered up. The clinic's board saw it. Two colleagues asked him, with careful voices, whether everything was all right. His referral rate dropped by a third in 6 weeks. Nathan hired a private investigator. It took 4 weeks. The investigator traced the digital fingerprints back through a chain of proxy accounts to a single burner email registered a prepaid phone purchased at a gas station 2 miles from Ryan's apartment. Nathan drove to Ryan's house that same evening. You tried to end my career, Nathan said when Ryan opened the door. Ryan didn't flinch. He leaned against the doorframe and said, almost calmly, that Nathan had always acted like the most important person in every room. I was leveling the playing field. Nathan had expected rage in himself. What he felt instead was something colder and quieter, a kind of absolute clarity about who this man was. Danielle had been devastated. She had confronted Ryan in a scene Nathan had watched from the hallway. She had stopped speaking to her brother for months. But Ryan had gravitational pull on the people who loved him. By the time the clinic officially declined Nathan's partnership, reputation uncertainty, Ryan was back at Sunday dinners, charming and unrepentant, and Daniela was passing him the breadbasket. Part 5. The Campaign. The harassment began the morning after Nathan refused the surgery. It started with phone calls, his personal cell, the hospital's main line, calls at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., calls that rang once and disconnected, just long enough to jolt him awake. He had changed his number. The calls would find the new one within a week. Then came in the person visits. Nathan was mid rounds when the nurse appeared at the elbow with an expression he didn't like. There was a man in the waiting room, she said. He had been there for 40 minutes. He was talking to the patients. Nathan turned the corner and saw Ryan standing near a row of chairs, speaking loudly enough for the entire room to hear. He was explaining with the casual authority of someone who had rehearsed that his own brother in law had refused to treat him, that Nathan had turned away family, that if he couldn't help the people closest to him, what did they say about how he treated strangers? The waiting room gone silent. A woman in the corner clutched at her purse. An older man stared at Nathan with a measuring look. Nathan asked Ryan to leave, calmly, firmly, the way he had learned to deliver bad news to patients' families without effect, without flinching. Ryan got louder. By the time hospital security escorted him out, the damage was already in the air, that invisible, weightless thing that the rumors are made of. That evening, Nathan checked the clinic's Google reviews. He had never done that before. His rating had always been strong, the kind built over years of careful, compassionate work. What he found made his stomach drop. 14 new reviews, all posted within 6-hour window, all anonymous, all variations on the same theme. That he was cold, that he refused to help people in need, that he cared more about his personal grudge than his patients. One read, he turned away a family member who was suffering. Ask yourself what he will do to you. Nathan printed out it and put it in his desk drawer. Evidence, he told himself, not grief. Evidence. Part 6. The Parking Lot. 3 weeks into the campaign, Nathan walked out the hospital at 7:30 in the evening to find Ryan leaning against his car. The parking lot was mostly empty. The overhead lights buzzed. Somewhere in the distance, a truck downshifted on highway. Nathan stopped walking. Ryan looked at him across the hood and said, with complete composure, that none of this had needed to happen. That if Nathan had simply performed the surgery, a surgery that would have taken 2 hours of his comfortable, prestigious life, they wouldn't be standing here. You did this to yourself, Ryan said. Nathan looked at the man. He thought about the wedding, band he hadn't wanted, the career opportunity that had been sabotaged, the 3 a.m. phone calls, the patients in the waiting room who had looked at him he might be something to be afraid of. He said nothing. He got in his car and drove home. That night, he sat across from Daniela in their kitchen and told her that he was done. He wouldn't attend another family function while Ryan and Carol were welcome there. He couldn't live in a household that treated his tormentors as guests. He told her she had a few days to think about it. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said she didn't need a few days. She chose him. Part 7. The Evidence and the Confrontation. Cutting contact with Ryan and Carol had not stopped them. It had redirected them. The calls and messages shifted to Danielle. Carol accused her daughter of being cold, ungrateful, disloyal. Ryan sent long text messages at midnight. They showed up at Daniela's workplace twice, causing scenes in the lobby that required her manager to get involved. Then, 4 weeks after the estrangement, in mail arrived in Nathan's inbox. He almost didn't open it. It was from address he didn't recognize. Inside were screenshots of conversation between Ryan and a cousin. The conversation was explicit and methodical. Ryan outlined a strategy: escalate the pressure, destroy Nathan's online reputation, contact the state medical board with fabricated concerns, keep up the social media campaign. The goal, he wrote in one message, was to make Nathan so professionally compromised that he would not agree to anything make it stop. Nathan forwarded it to his attorney. Then he forwarded it to Danielle. She read it twice. Then she called her mother and told her they needed to meet. Carol had assumed the meeting was a peace offering, that Nathan had come to his senses about the surgery. She and Ryan arrived at the coffee shop looking almost cheerful. Nathan and Daniela were already seated. The screenshots were printed and stacked neatly on the table. The cheerfulness evaporated. Ryan denied it first. Then he questioned the source. Then, when Daniela read aloud one of own sentences back to him, in his own syntax, he shifted into anger. He said Nathan had never been good enough for her. He said that for years, Nathan had stolen her attention and loyalty away from family and had raised her. He said he was the one who actually loved her. Daniela looked at her brother for a long moment. Then she picked up the papers, placed them back in the folder, and stood up. Goodbye, Ryan, she said. They walked out together. Part 8. Aftermath. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way only aftermath of long conflict can be. The silence wasn't peaceful, not at first. It was the silence of a house after a storm, full of small strange sounds where familiar noise used to be. Danielle grieved, not loudly. She would sometimes go still in the middle of an ordinary moment, washing a dish, folding laundry, and Nathan would sit near her without speaking, because he understood that some losses don't have the right words. Nathan went back to work. His colleagues had seen enough the situation to form their own opinions, and most of them, quietly, professionally, came to stand beside him. A senior surgeon stopped him in a hallway after one afternoon and told him that his reputation was intact where he mattered. The Google reviews were disputed and removed with legal documentation. The social media posts were taken down under defamation complaints. It took 3 months, but the digital record began to repair, one entry at a time. Nathan began therapy. He had resisted it for years, not because he thought it was weakness, but because he hadn't had time. Now he made time. He thought about the compounding weight of being quietly, systematically undermined. He thought about what it costs a person to keep performing dignity under sustained attack. He thought eventually about what it meant to finally let someone see a full damage. He started sleeping again. Part 9. The Letter. 6 months after the coffee shop, an envelope arrived with Carol Herman's handwriting on it. Nathan set it on the kitchen counter and left it there for 2 days before opening it. The letter inside was 2 pages, handwritten on a plain white paper. Carol wrote that she had spent a long time telling herself she was caught in the middle. She had told herself that both sides had fault, that family conflict was complicated, that enabling Ryan was just part of loving him. The letter said she now understood that none of that had been true. She had watched her son and chosen repeatedly to look the other way. She had allowed her daughter's life to be disrupted. She had allowed Nathan to be targeted and said nothing. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, she wrote. She was only trying to say that she finally understood what she had been part of. Daniela read the letter in the kitchen with afternoon light coming through the window. When she finished, she set it down and didn't speak for a while. I think I want to see her, she said it finally. Nathan nodded. Then we will, when you are ready on our terms. They met Carol at a small cafe near the park. They set boundaries clearly, not angrily, just plainly. Carol listened. There were no dramatic scenes, no tearful group embrace, just a tentative, careful first step towards something that might eventually slowly resemble repair. Ryan sent no letter. Ryan made no call. Ryan moved on to the next version of his life, as he always had, without apology.